Welcome, everybody, to another PAM podcast. Thank you so much for joining. I am Okuhle Mpepo. I'm a member of the PAM EC, and today's podcast, as you can see in the title, is about poverty porn and voluntourism. I am joined by one of my day ones and a great and very accomplished friend of mine. Yangs, introduce yourself, please.
So apparently they still call me Yangs. Haven't gone by that name in a while, but anyway, hello everyone. My name is Yangeni Saidi, and I am a third year med student at WITS. But obviously, I would think we're more than what we do. So I guess I am someone that likes to think and think a lot, and apparently that's what you guys do here with PAM. So thank you very much for having me. I did a little bit of debating in um, high school and that, and now I'm a public speaking coach, and I'm enjoying it. And I would like to thank Okuhle for inviting me to share some of my thoughts with you today. Yeah.
And thank you for joining us, Yangeni. You know how they say that rugby players from high school never really outgrow that because they always talk about it forever. I'm
Yeah,
convinced debaters are the cultural equivalent of those rugby players because we just never let it go. We never,
fully. And
we
I
literally,
promise you, you remember your rank. End of
yeah,
matric, you
I
remember it.
remember my rank for every single competition ever attended. Oh, I love that. Okay, no, that's perfect. Thank you so much again, Yangs, for joining. Please don't forget right now to go and subscribe to this channel and also follow our Instagram at postanthromovement_UP so you can keep up with the things that we do here at PAM and also just get notified about all our live events as well as when we post our podcast. So thanks for that, and let's get into it. So,
What
poverty porn and
sorry, what a
volunteerism.
host you are.
Pardon?
What a host you are. That intro.
Oh, please, I'm unleashing my inner YouTuber. So, poverty porn, Yangs, let's get into this.
Yes.
Basics. What is poverty porn, or what do we understand it to be?
I think poverty porn has become something today that has evolved into something that it wasn't yesterday. And by that I mean that it's evolving with the culture and it's evolving with how we express ourselves today. So poverty porn, in my opinion, started way earlier than TV commercials, way earlier than the adverts you see on Instagram,
Mm.
way before the tourism of poverty porn that's
Yeah.
included in it. I think poverty porn started with the inception of poverty itself.
Fair.
So to really break down what poverty porn is, I think we have to start at the
Not
beginning of
there.
what is poverty in itself, and then why does poverty porn become necessary to uphold poverty? You hear
That's
me?
very true. And I actually hadn't thought about it in that regard, Yangs, because for me, when I think about poverty porn, having grown up in a very technological society and being surrounded by social media all the time, the poverty porn that
Mm,
I know and understand that I'm used to seeing is, the emaciated pictures of human suffering,
mm,
the classic starving child in Africa, the
mm,
the
mm,
pleading faces, the begging eyes, the
see,
degrading and undignified images of humans. And I hadn't really thought of what poverty porn might have looked like or been even before that, and
mm.
knowing and seeing that. Okay, no, that's a really, really interesting way to look at it. So, where do you think it started, and what can we establish as poverty porn before the social media era and what we know it to be
Mm.
now?
So I like what you said. Like it's the really intense pictures of the black child with the big belly suffering that we
Yeah,
see today
precisely.
to be poverty porn. But I tell you that began. That sounded like debating. Sorry. I tell you that began
How you
a
that?
long a long time ago. I watched this movie. I think it was called Black Venus.
Mm,
Um, and it tells a story of Sarah Bartman. I believe that to be her
mm,
name. I could be
mm-hmm,
corrected, and about how she was taken from South Africa in the 1800s, I think, and she
mm.
was put in a circus and was showcased
On
as
display, yeah.
as the Black Venus. That's what she was showcased as, and they were like, "This is the Hottentot woman." I'm using these terms because this is what
Those are the
they were
terms they
actually
used.
saying, not to degrade anyone, but that was the term they
Yeah.
used. And in and of itself, they showcase this woman as these are the savages that live in Africa. Look at how voluptuous their features are, all the savagery. And to me, that was the beginning, because that was one of the first times where post-colonialism, or actually during colonialism, they took someone and presented an image of this is what the people, the savages that we're taking resources from look like. And what that creates is an idea that these people deserve the treatment that they're getting, and therefore it's okay for us to continue treating them like that. Why? Because they're savages. So that was the imagery, and to me, that's the first instance of poverty porn that I can recall, because it's showing someone that this is the poor person and this is how savage they are, and therefore, if and by us bringing them here, we're helping them to experience a new world, but also they're savages, and so therefore their lifestyles are justified. And I think because of the construct of poverty, you need poor people need to believe that poverty is deserved and it is their fault for it to continue. Poverty continues, allowing the bourgeoisie to take advantage of poor people, and therefore upholds poverty within itself. Does
What
that
you
make sense?
said just now makes 110,000,000,000% actually. And what you've just outlined is actually what is at the core of poverty porn, right? And the reason that I say
Mm,
that is because we discuss how poverty porn is the emaciated pictures of humans suffering. And I'm very
mm,
particular about using the word humans because a lot of the poverty porn that is released attempts to illustrate poor people as less than human, as objects of our
mm,
charity, right? That
mm,
we are there to help them as the more fortunate people, right? And you're so right when you say that it has its roots in that idea that they are savages and they are less civilized, and therefore our duty is to help them, right?
mm,
And that's why in degrading them and making them seem lesser human than what we are, it makes it easier for us to be able to distribute this media and this poverty porn, degrading and stripping them of their dignity, of their image of humanness, because regardless of whether or not you are poor or you are well off, there shouldn't be this level of, I don't want to use the term humiliation, but of just
It
like
is
general
humiliation.
degradation. Do you get what I'm saying? Like
It
general
is
degradation
humiliation.
of them. They shouldn't have to be, in order for me, Yangeni, as somebody who is potentially better off, in order for me to want to donate or give something to you as somebody who is lesser off than I am, I shouldn't have to see you suffering. My
Mm,
human nature and compassion should be what compels me to want to help a fellow human, and not because I think I have to give it to you because you are this starving child who is in need of my aid. So what you said right now is actually so important because it's so central to what poverty porn actually is, and it's not acknowledging that even poor people are deserving of dignity, they are deserving of equality,
mm,
they're deserving of being our equals. Do you know what I'm saying? The equals to
mm,
people who are potentially better off than they are. So I think what you just said right now is so incredibly important. So it's important for us to just to establish, like, what does poverty porn even imply about poverty itself, right? And how does that then warp humanitarian aid or charity?
mm. Oh, I like that. I like the question, especially because you mentioned, like, how does that warp humanitarian aid? And that's a
Yeah.
big factor in poverty porn, a very
Mm.
big factor. It's no coincidence that you see a lot of imagery of poverty porn followed up by donate money to this philanthropist,
Mm.
or this philanthropist has like a charity, and then they're going to pump
Donate
this how many
$1 to
millions.
save a starving child in
And
Asia.
that
You know
is
what I
not
mean?
a mistake.
It's
That
not a
is not a
mistake. It's so
mistake.
intentional.
That is so intentional. And I like the word. You also said how these are early on. You mentioned how, oh, you used the word help them, right? And I like that help them because it's especially othering, saying that there's
Yes.
a them and there's an us. And in that
Yes.
othering, it has the word help, which I think is extremely important to the dynamic of poverty porn because it changes how people perceive they can help the others. So in that I mean people are living within poverty, and them living within poverty is not a construct of their own.
Yes.
And by
Definitely.
creating an other, you make yourself, the people that are within, for example, the bourgeoisie,
Yeah.
and you create the others to believe that they are a circumstance or they are a product of their circumstance, of their own
Answers.
doing, right? So
Yes.
that word
That they
help
put
then is
themselves in that
important.
situation.
Yes, and that word help then is important because there are, in my opinion, two forms of this help that you speak of. The one, which is presented by poverty porn, is that we need to give money to these philanthropists, and the philanthropists have to give more money, and then we're going to pump money into the schools or pump money into the areas that need this help, and therefore the problem is solved. The other
Yes.
help, which I think is way more important, but is not shown purposefully, is the help that makes first world countries, colonialist powers, and colonizers take responsibility for the poverty that they're caused. And this is why I say poverty in itself is intentional.
Yes.
People need to remain poor so that the rich can get richer.
Yes.
There's no functioning way. And and if there is, someone can come and explain to me. There's no functioning way in which the 1%, and in fact the global north, can live comfortable lives like that without people who are at the bottom doing a majority of the labor force
Definitely.
that need to be in that mindset to do the majority of the labor force. There's no functional way in which those people can enjoy such a lifestyle. And therefore, I think that poverty porn is a construct to keep the poor poor. By changing the meaning of helping people from actually changing systems that keep them in, which keep them within poor conditions, changing that meaning of help to help as in give $50 or 50 rand, and the
Yeah.
philanthropist will give a couple million, and then we will see what we can do. A lot of these charities actually don't have physical turnover, physical viewage of the genuine help that they create. And if there
Yeah.
is, a lot of this quote unquote help that is spoken of is very superficial. It doesn't go deep enough to change a cycle of poverty. It goes
Yes.
as much as providing food for a week. And then the next week, what happens?
What you just said now is so important because it goes back to how none of the aid that they're providing is sustainable, right? And this is another one of my big pet peeves when it comes to poverty porn, is the fact that it inspires charity and not activism or sustainable development. So it's just about donations and giving money to charity more than it is about actual structural change. Do you get what I'm saying? To try and alleviate the
Mm,
effects of this poverty or to get people out of the poverty itself, right?
mm,
And that all is as a result of there's so many things that make poverty porn bad. So like just even the stereotypes that come with poverty, right? The misrepresentation of poverty itself. That is so bad because the painting of a picture of poverty as only being the starving child in Africa with the bloated belly has led to the fact that now we can't even acknowledge poverty in all its other forms. We are using the most extreme form as our main idea, as the face of poverty, which makes it incredibly difficult for us to acknowledge poverty on a different level. So, for example, South Africa is one of the most unequal societies in the world. I mean, I'm sure at this point, we actually, last I checked, we have the highest Gini coefficient. So we are
mm,
incredibly unequal, right? We have so many people who are living under our poverty line, right? But we're unable to acknowledge them as poor if they do not fit the idea that we have of poverty that's been perpetuated by poverty porn. So that
mm,
starving child in Africa narrative. If they can't fit that, you can't imagine that somebody who is at the same university as you is living under the poverty line. Like you can't actually internalize that or acknowledge that this person actually doesn't have, because if we define poverty, it's the basic needs of survival, right? Access to those things, access to shelter, to clothing, to food, to electricity, to water. Do you know what I'm saying? So when somebody has access to all of those things, maybe even in limited amounts, we still can't acknowledge that that person actually does qualify as being poor or living under the poverty line. We only understand it as that starving child in Africa. So that's very, very messy. And because of that misrepresentation, it leads to us only wanting to give charity instead of actually making structural changes. So yeah,
I think
there's so many broader ramifications of poverty porn and like how poverty itself is portrayed in the media. Yeah.
I think we should talk more about. You mentioned the sustainability of the charity that is provided by a lot of these poverty porn organizations. I think you should talk more about that. Like, what did you mean by it's unsustainable?
I say that it's unsustainable because it goes back to the point of you are donating food today, but you are not like, what is the plan for next week? Right. And that goes back to how poverty porn promotes charity. So the giving, the donations, but it doesn't actually advocate for any structural changes or institutional changes that'll actually change the lives of the people who are affected by poverty porn. And so let me give you an example that'll maybe help further illustrate what I'm saying. There's the company Tom's Shoes, right? They have a
Okay.
campaign whereby it's in America. You buy one pair of shoes and then another pair of shoes is donated to a starving child in Africa, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Who said they want shoes? Who said they want your shoes? I don't even mean to be inflammatory, but who said they want your shoes? Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many problems with this Tom's Shoes campaign, and I just want to get into that a little bit. For starters, you're taking away work for local cobblers, right? They're going to be out of business. Let's just start there because you want to donate shoes, right? So you're not actually helping the people in that community. It would be different if maybe they said that the shoes that would be created, they'd open a factory there and the shoes that would be created by the people in that community. No, they're just going to be sending shoes from America. So that's not actually helping any of the people in the community. Secondly, it's not a charity. It's definitely a for-profit organization because the shoes that they're selling are for $60. They only cost $4 to make. So you're technically buying two pairs of shoes when you pay the $60. Where's the other $52 going?
Mm-hmm.
To Tom's shoes. Do you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So you, as somebody living in a first world country, when you see this campaign, you're like, OMG, I'm doing a good thing by buying Tom's shoes. Why? Because when I bought those shoes, a child in Africa is getting a pair of shoes. Who said they need shoes? Who says they're not focusing? They're more focused on unemployment or malaria or other things that need healthcare, more important things. Who said they need your shoes?
That's such a
You
big
hear what I'm
point.
saying? So this
Mm-hmm.
is like a basic example, but it just goes to show you how a lot of these organizations that want to make it seem as if they are helping, the starving child in Africa in inverted commas are actually not. They're doing it for themselves and they are exploiting these people in the process, right? But the thing we need to acknowledge is that poverty porn works. And it's painful to say that, but it actually does. It works, not in helping anybody, but it does help in getting people to donate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's just for now think: is sensationalism and the exploitation of people justified if it helps those in need? Let's say it did actually help them. Would that make poverty porn justified? Do you think?
Hmm. Well, that's a very interesting question
Right?
because then now it begins to ask like that do the ends justify the
Justify the
means,
means.
right?
Yeah.
That's a very interesting question. I think in the case of poverty porn, where the ends don't work, because let's be honest, if it worked, then wouldn't there be like reduced poverty? But the um, generally around the world, I mean, maybe COVID might be a factor, but generally around the world, poverty in in many countries that are experiencing extreme poverty is increasing.
Fair.
So Like, are the ends working?
Are they really? Are they really though?
Like,
It's difficult to figure out because it's like it's still wrong. Like if we're going to talk about like are we going to think about trying to be utilitarian or we're going to think about the ethics of it? Is it still
mm,
right? Because even if it was helping in alleviating poverty, it doesn't
mm,
change the narrative or the illustration of poverty that we actually have. So
mm,
the ideas around poverty would still not help make any structural changes because people still have the mindset that the only form of poverty is the starving child in Africa, if that makes
mm,
sense. So I
mm.
don't think that it would still be justified to help them. I really, really do not, right? Like I really don't.
And I think, especially with the example that you made with that company, right, with the
Some
shoes, I
shoes.
think both can be true. So yes, maybe a kid has shoes to go to school with. That's that's great, but that doesn't mean that the
Mm.
company is doing its best to
Yes.
to help alleviate poverty if that's the goal, or if that's the goal of this company or this NGO.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
both can, I think the both can exist. Where yes, there is good in certain space, but this good is not enough. I think.
Enough to justify. And more importantly, like with what you say, the reason I kept on asking, who said we want your shoes, is because it's a direct link to the images that the West might be seeing. So if all I
Right.
know of Africa is seeing starving, undressed children,
Yes.
what
Oh,
the first thing I'm gonna think when
if
somebody's
I
like
donate
shoes,
to this
they're like, oh,
company,
they need shoes because the photos I've seen,
yeah,
they're never wearing shoes. They're always naked, chilling in the
exactly.
bundus. Do you get what I'm saying?
Fully,
So our
fully.
proximity to poverty has made it easier for us to be able to see that that's not something that they need and it's not something we would prioritize for them. But the West, being so far removed from real poverty, well, not real poverty. I don't want to say real poverty because I don't want to believe that poverty does not exist in the West or everywhere
Mm,
because inequality exists everywhere. But poverty in the form that they understand, being the child in Africa, the starving child in Africa, poverty like that may not exist. And as a result, that level of starvation, that's all they know. So when they see those photos, they're like, shame, this child doesn't have shoes. Let me get them shoes. Said, I want your shoes.
mm-hmm,
Do you get what I'm saying?
mm-hmm.
But now I
And
want
that's
to ask you,
exactly, and that exactly ties into the purpose of poverty porn, which is to show a narrative that this is the
yes,
narrative, and therefore we can, if we as an upstanding, if we as a can be upstanding society within our Western society and donate some money for shoes, we're going to solve poverty, and you can have a good day afterwards because you made change.
you
And
made a change.
it alleviates that responsibility because it gives them a certain sense of gratification. I've done my
Yes,
job, and
definitely.
therefore it's fine.
That's so true. But now, Yang, I want to ask you a question.
Mm,
What is the difference, right, between the beggar in your home country and the starving child in Africa? And why are people more willing to donate to the starving child in Africa and then ignore the beggar that comes and knocks on their car window?
mm,
If you're so serious about making change, what is the difference?
mm. Because I mean, real charity starts at home.
Exactly, exactly, precisely.
Like
It starts
you
at
gotta
home.
you can't see the splinter in someone's eye before you see the plank in your own.
Exactly.
It's the
And it
same
goes
thing. And
back
I
to that idea that people don't believe that poverty can be right next to them if they are not poor. Do you get what
mm,
I'm saying? So,
mm,
and because of that, it's so much easier to believe in the starving child in Asia, all the way over there, than to believe in the poverty of the person right next to us. And even is further emphasized by what you had said earlier about how people, the othering, whereby people believe that people who are poor, it's as a result of their own doing and not systematic injustice
mm, mm.
or
There's
structural
an us
injustice.
and there's an us and there's a them.
Exactly.
And that's exactly it. And that's what that us and them does is it calms the psyche, it removes the guilty conscience and makes you believe,
Yes.
oh, I'm conscious actually of the fact that there is an us and a them, and that's because of their circumstances.
Mm,
And that's unfortunate, but it's okay because they deserve it.
definitely. No, I think we've really covered the basis in terms of what we identify as poverty porn and like what it means and what the ramifications thereof are, I would just like now to ask, so the misrepresentation of poverty we've established has already warped the idea of poverty, right? And there's something that I had noticed when I was about, poverty porn, right? There's this element of, like, poverty porn doesn't only exist in a vacuum or in Africa or in your global south, right? And that was something that I was also interested to see, because I was reading about a CBS show called The Briefcase. Are you familiar with it?
No, I'm not.
Okay, let me just give you a little summary. So basically, in The Briefcase, there's a family, right, with potential financial setbacks. Maybe they are in debt, or there's something that they're like, maybe it's like any type of financial setbacks, right? They're struggling in some form or another, right? They are presented with a briefcase that has $100,000, right? They have 72 hours to decide whether to share that money with another struggling family, to keep that money for themselves, right? And at first, I thought it was a little weird. And like after seeing clips of it, seeing people crying, not knowing what to do about this because they need this money in order to cover their debts, right? But
Yeah.
what they don't know is that the family that they're supposed to be sharing the money with, supposedly, has also been given a briefcase, right? They're both going to end up with the money, but it's just a test of their morals and their ethics to see what they would choose in a potential situation whereby they had to giving, or they had to either give or to keep the money, right? And I thought this was a very sinister form of poverty porn that I noticed, because it is in
Yeah.
the West. But I
You.
thought it was, there's something very particularly sinister about it, because why aren't poor people allowed to want money? Because the idea is that if you are in need, you must therefore be willing to give. And I think there's something really not right about that. It doesn't sit
Yo,
well with it. And I wanted to find out what your thoughts are on that.
that is messed up.
Right?
What?
Why?
Like, it shocks me that such
It's
things can exist.
humiliation
Like,
porn more than anything. Because why would you want to put somebody in that kind of position? Watching these people cry in the clips and seeing them really just so conflicted about what to do, because they do want to give, but they genuinely need this money.
you
And
know, you-
there was so much hate given to these families when they decided to keep the money. And my problem with that is, why are poor people not allowed to want money? And furthermore, I'm thinking about the money making producers sitting there counting their
mm,
coin as they're making money off of humiliating.
can you hear me? I think I lost you. Okay. Um, yeah, so I think there's two things that immediately jump out at me. Two things. One, who signed off on this? Like, you were like sitting behind, like, this had to go through a producer, an executive producer, um, casting, and everyone was like, yes, this is a good idea.
Definitely that.
What And I think that's exactly the system that we're talking about. And why I say it's a system is because it's exactly what you were asking about. Why aren't poor people allowed to want money? I'll tell you why poor people aren't allowed to want money. Because by showing people this discourse, you're showing people how it's people's decisions that keep them poor. It's people's
Yes,
selfishness that keep them poor. They are poor because they're in debt and they don't want to share their money. And this is what's going to keep them poor. And it justifies
exactly.
poverty. And it's exactly what like what I was saying. It's the bourgeoisie telling you, because who's watching the shows? It's not
Who's watching it?
people. It's not poor people watching the
Exactly.
show. Oh, they're poor too. I'm going to share my. No, it's the people
No.
in the bourgeoisie who have access to CBS who are going to watch the shows and be like, yeah. The poor people are such bad people, and therefore it's okay if I'm in my big house and continue to exploit them because these are the
Mm.
decisions that they make.
And more importantly, because these people don't necessarily fit the narrative that they have of poverty, as in they're not that starving child in Africa, and they're actually people
Mm,
who do have some level of a livelihood, they shouldn't be greedy, because they're better off than that starving child, regardless of the fact that they're in poverty. And that is the thought
mm,
process that goes through the mind of that very bourgeoisie that wants to other them, that no, but you're still better off than that starving child in Africa, so you should still be able to give. No, poor people should be able to want money. They have needs. They have other issues that need that money. So I just thought that was a
Surely.
really crazy example of like poverty porn, because we focus so much on poverty porn in like the global south. I just wanted to get an idea of what it would be like if we contextualize it to the global north. And I thought that was just such a crazy example. So
That's a
crazy.
great example. It's so great that and scary. You
Exactly,
see what I'm
right?
trying
That
to say? Like
that
that's
producer who
scary.
decided to sign off on this was like, let's make money off of the exploitation of poor people. Let's just put poor people
Mm.
through the most and let's put it on TV and let's see what people think about it. It
And
only
to
ended up
go
having one season, and I think because it probably just not only got bad reviews or ratings, but I think people just picked up on that there's something severely wrong with this, right? And
goodness, right?
going on to this idea of people wanting to make money off of these kinds of shows and stuff like that, I wanted to move on to the idea that poverty porn has created a somewhat of a fetish, right? Um, and this could be in part to the fact that maybe people have become desensitized to poverty. But I just wanted to give you another example. This is something that happened so recently. Like,
Sorry, I hate to interrupt you, but
yeah,
before we leave the idea of the concept of that show of poor
yeah, yeah,
people
yeah.
not being allowed to want money, um, I recently, I think it was a wisecrack or something. I watched a video explaining how I forgot the philosopher, forgot their name, but the philosopher was talking about what choice is and what freedom of choice is inherently,
Mm.
and they were saying that if you are faced with a choice that has repercussions that could affect your life to the point of death and starvation, then it's not a choice. That's coercion.
Literally,
That's not a choice, that's
literally,
coercion. But the way
it
the
is.
TV show makes it look, looks like it's a
It's a
choice.
choice, but it's not. Oh
But
no,
it's
that's
not. It
that's
it
spot
it,
on.
it immediately stops being a freedom of choice. It as soon as that happens. So what choice is? Do you want a red apple or a green apple? That's choice because they're both apples. But if you're
Mm.
saying that if you choose a red apple, there's ramifications that are going to affect your life deeply, then it's no longer
Your
choice.
livelihood. Imagine.
It's
No, that's
coercion.
so true.
So
That definitely
that's
is. It literally is no longer a choice.
hmm.
You know what I mean?
That's something
That's definitely so true.
wanted to
Um,
touch on that before we jumped off. But yeah,
no, no, that's
you were saying about the fetishization of
good. The
porn and
fetishization of poverty. So, for example,
mhm.
in the last 48 hours, there is a YouTuber named Beast. Um, and okay,
Yeah, so
before
I
I
saw
get to
that.
it, you saw it, right? Okay, but maybe if whoever our audience
Explain, yeah,
is not aware of it,
yeah.
with regards to Squid Game, the series, the Netflix series, it's obviously a commentary on how difficult the lives of people are under capitalism, Korea,
Mhm.
right? Um, but now the West has turned it into some cute and quirky trend where they are having Squid Game themed like events. Even some like cafes that I've seen on Twitter have like taken over that kind of theme, which is kind of crazy because like, how do you take a commentary on capitalism and then try and like use capitalist
And turn it
strategies
into
to make money? To do like that's really crazy. But anyways, there's a YouTuber named Mr. Beast who basically he recreated the Squid Games, right? And he got 456 random players, such as in the Netflix series, and then gave like a prize of £324,000. So that's a bucket load of money, right?
Mhm.
But like with regards to this, when I saw this, it had me, for starters, has the misconception of what poverty is led to people fetishizing poverty? Because in my mind, when you watch Squid Game, you see accomplished people who have maybe become bankrupt, or you're not mostly seeing people fit the profile of what a poor person is. You know, they
Okay.
are clearly products of their decisions and they are in major debt. So therefore, it's not seen necessarily as them being poor and now ending up in the situation that they're in, but it's seen more as, I don't know how to describe it, but like it doesn't have any form of sensitivity around it, right? So they're not really, people aren't really able to grasp the fact that it's a commentary on capitalism, because to them it's just a cute little storyline of people who made bad decisions and now they're screwed, so they have to go play some dumb games and die. Like
Mhm.
that's That's the idea around it. So they completely
Mm,
missed the plot. And I think that the reason
mm,
that they were unable to really understand what was happening in the game and therefore not have any sensitivity to what is actually being discussed is because it doesn't fit the profile of what they understand poverty to really be.
mm, mm. So in that way, you're saying that the I guess the writers of even Squid Game are trying to show you that poverty doesn't look like it's not the monolith of the starving black child,
Yes.
and a lot of these people that are, I guess, using the capitalism to benefit from it, Mr. Beast included, being like, yeah, let's play the games and then win some money, ha 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 ha. Like they missed the
Yes.
sinister underlying tone of how fucked this
The
inherently is.
system is. Precisely.
Mm.
No, precisely. That's exactly it. So I just wanted to find out, like, do you think that in that way, poverty porn has created poverty fetishes, or like, have people become desensitized to poverty, or is it not so much that they've become desensitized and can't see what's happening in Squid Game, but it's just that not that they're desensitized, but they just don't acknowledge it as poverty because of that othering, because of the idea that these people are just there because they don't know how to handle their coin. They
Mm,
gamble. Do you know what I mean?
mm,
They trade and they lose a whole bunch of money.
mm. I think you that's very true, and I think poverty has been fetishized in many cultures across
Or
the
maybe not even
board.
fetishized, romanticized, I think would
Yeah,
even be a more
romanticized
appropriate word.
fully, fully across the board, like almost in every culture that you can experience. Because you look at Black America and how a lot of the culture that comes out of there, specifically in rap, was romanticized, and they
Yeah,
were
yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Oh, the right way to do it." We look at
Oh, that's so important.
look
Yes.
you look at the UK when they talk about roadmen pushing peas, and the roadmen are people that have to sell drugs because they need the money, but then
Literally.
like because of the culture, everyone's trying to dress in the puffer jackets, and they're wearing the puffer jackets because it's cold outside, so they're trying to sell drugs. But now people are wearing the puffer jackets and think because it's style now.
Vibes.
It's been
That
romanticized.
is so true, Yangs. No,
You
definitely. No,
feel so
definitely.
you're chatting 100%. It happens almost everywhere in the world. It happens right here in South Africa. Can't think of many examples right now, but it's right in front of us, and it happens because it's like they take the things that look cool and they just leave the rest. They're like,
Yeah.
okay, but
No,
we're
definitely.
actually not going to sell the
That's
drugs because
exactly
we're
what they
going
did
to
in Squid
achieve
Game. So true. Okay,
exactly,
no, that's perfect.
exactly,
I've literally loved
exactly.
this conversation that we've had on poverty porn because it is literally the most phenomenal base that we need in order to like jump into voluntourism, right? So
Yo,
voluntourism is yay, another chat for yay chat.
yo.
So voluntourism is basically volunteer tourism, so international volunteer, right? And this
Hmm.
happens in so many countries in the global south, whereby it's not always necessarily people coming from the West, but the majority do tend to come from the West, and they
Hmm.
volunteer in the global south in whatever's needed. So sometimes it'll be in teaching, it'll be in schools, or like building churches, wherever they're helping, that's normally where they'll tend to go, right? And on the like, generally, this looks kind of like seems like a cool opportunity for them as well. OMG, I get to do the charity work that I want to do, but I also get to like get a free travel, and then like I can post my photos on Instagram and get like 10,000 likes for all my followers. That's
Mm,
the Americans are thinking. That's what the West is thinking when they're doing this, but they don't
mm,
necessarily see how problematic
mm,
volunteerism is, despite how cutesy it looks on the front. And I want to go back for us to even just start this conversation. I want to go back to something you said earlier on that was so important about why not start at home, right? Why international? Why do they feel the need that in order for them to impact, they have to go to Kenya and go to Ghana and go teach at those schools, or go to Costa Rica or to Taiwan? Why can they not make change within their own cities? It goes back to that question about what's the difference between the beggar that comes and knocks on your car window as opposed to somebody who is living in a completely different country who is experiencing poverty, right? Um,
mm.
it goes back to that idea that why don't they start at home? And all of that is rooted in poverty porn. It's the fact that they can't acknowledge that somebody next to them is poor, and they have to go elsewhere where there's a no man's land poverty
Yeah,
exists.
you have to
You
go.
get what
You
I'm
have to
saying?
go
It's that little
elsewhere.
Bermuda Triangle,
Mhm.
that unspoken place, that location without a like that's not on the map where poverty exists. And let me go there and do isolated work in 3 weeks, and then come back and put it on my CV. And I've done my humanitarian. So
Put it on my TV is very important.
put it on my CV. Can't forget that. You have to do
Yeah,
that.
very important.
Exactly.
Mm. I
Exactly,
think,
right? You think?
yeah, yeah. So especially with voluntourism, exactly what you said about coming from the privileged and going to the disenfranchised and the less privileged,
Mm.
and giving of myself. I'm going to do the
Oh,
hard
that whole
labor.
I am helping them.
I'm gonna do the hard labor. And I think that's very important is especially with the ones where they go and build schools, right? The building schools narrative.
Yes.
I'm gonna go. I built schools in a foreign country. Are, are you a carpenter?
Are
Are
you
you,
a carpenter?
are you a designer? Huh?
Are you a carpenter?
Huh?
I want shoes.
You did technology in grade 9, and now you want to build schools.
You literally think. You literally think. This actually, I was in a TED talk by Jinting Kang, and she spoke about came to the voluntourism when she went and did international volunteering in China, right? And she was speaking to one of the volunteers there who had previously gone to Costa Rica to build schools. And
Mm,
after that group of volunteers had left after building the schools, that firstly they were not qualified to build, right?
mm,
And secondly, the fact that they were taking away work from the locals who could have built those schools instead.
mm.
The organization that she was working for destroyed the building so that the next group of volunteers could build it again. Ciao.
No, I've never heard of that one. That's
Yes. And that should basically
another
sum up
level.
the uselessness of voluntourism. If that doesn't do it for you, then I literally don't know what will, right? I literally don't know what will. Because
The
there's so
uselessness
many
and the
problems with
cycle.
it.
The
It's a cycle.
cycle.
It's a cycle, right? So I was listening to another TED talk by Madana's Gute. It was like it
Mm,
was also a TED talk about this because I was just listening to a lot of people who were detailing, and it's so funny how all the people that do TED talk realize how crappy voluntourism is after they've actually done the volunteer work, right? So she talked
yeah.
about how she was taking a gap year after high school. Started, she is underqualified in teaching, in pedagogy. She knows nothing about the culture in Ghana, and she was doing this volunteer work in Ghana in 2020, right?
Mm,
She detailed that experience as something so incredibly useless to everybody that was involved. Um,
mm,
Basically, because for starters, she's not qualified. So we also have the issue of now teachers who were already in Ghana are not getting work. Why? Because there are tons of volunteers that are coming from the West, right? Secondly, because people think that it's a savvy, cute, trendy way to travel, there were a lot of volunteers. It leads to a lot of useless. Now, organizations will get like 40 volunteers, whereas the school only needs maybe 30, right?
mm,
If not, maybe even less, maybe 10, 20 teachers. So now you've
mm,
brought them 40 teachers who are literally sitting there idle, but they will still get the benefit of posting a photo with one of the children and saying, oh, I loved working in Ghana for my summer, right? So
mm,
there's more exploitation that's there. Thirdly, she says that she was working at an orphanage, right? So it's an orphanage and they teach the kids at the orphanage. But what was so like it literally gave me goosebumps. It was so crazy to even think about, is that one of the children that she took a particular liking to goes into there's like a little visitors room, right, and gets a visit from a woman. And by the
mhm,
time that woman leaves, this child is inconsolable. She is crying. She is distraught, right? And so Madonna goes and asks like the rest of the staff, like what's going on, what's happening, is that woman, what's wrong? And they say,
mhm.
no, that woman is her mother, but this is an orphanage.
Um,
Okay, thank you. It's exactly.
um,
And this goes to the most scary, sinister part of a lot of volunteers, like voluntourism organizations, is the fact that they're actually creating orphans. So in order for them to elicit donation, they have to create orphans. That child chose to go to the orphanage to get an education and also that she could get donations and like get food and an education. But I really struggle to believe that a 5-year-old is going to decide for themselves to be separated from parents.
mm,
Do you get what I'm saying?
mm.
They are literally
Absolutely.
creating orphans just for the sake of voluntourism so that people from more of like well-off countries are able to go there and have their little flirtation with poverty. That, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
was slumming it for a couple of weeks. I took bucket baths and I had to walk to the river. Do you get what I'm saying? Like it's an experience to them to be in the bundus, to live that life. And I think that's so crazy that they would
Island
purposely
girl,
create
island
off
girl.
into that island. Yeah, literally that. So not only does it perpetuate the white savior narrative, but it's so crazy because a lot of the time these people are underqualified, they know nothing about the culture. So they get there and they teach about things that they firstly do not know. And there's
Mm,
I don't know if maybe it's me, but there's definitely a hint or a little bit of imperialism in there because they get there and sometimes they'll literally change the entire syllabus. They'll literally switch up everything in the schools. They're building the schools and they're also switching up what is taught in them. That it really it does nothing for the people that are there because they don't fully assimilate into that culture and they're not necessarily really too concerned about the fact that they're not there to assimilate. Why? Because they think
fully,
they're doing them a favor by bringing them Western concepts. And I think
fully,
that's really, really crazy.
fully. So I
No,
think
like,
it's exactly what you're saying. Instead of like, sure, a kid is fed for a week, right? But instead of doing that, instead of needing you having the, it's in a way narcissism to be like, I'm gonna
mhm.
impose my own shit on these people.
And you should be
Having
grateful for
Yes,
it.
and you can be grateful for having, instead of having that narcissistic way of charity, instead of doing that, to develop the infrastructure in that country for the country to run itself. So instead of taking the orphan away from
Precisely.
the mother so that you can give this orphan so and so education and you can have your people come and teach them, push resources and infrastructure into the place that allow the child to be with their mother and to get adequate schooling and adequate housing and adequate food and water in their own in their own environment to
Yes.
re-enfranchise those people instead of further disenfranchising them
Franchising
with
them.
your narcissism.
Precisely, because what it has created now is an experience for people in the West as opposed to actually trying to aid
Mm,
people in the South. Because if
an
you think about it,
experience.
a lot of these people go like they do this volunteer work absolutely free of charge. All their accommodation, their food, their travel, all of it is covered. And with that money, are you telling me you could not just focus on training the already existing teachers in Ghana, ensuring that these
Mm,
children have clothing and food and help try improve the infrastructure of the schools and create like transport like routes for them to be able to get from school back home, things like that. You could be funneling that money into the school, but instead you're using it to bring them Americans that know nothing, that can't teach
mm.
them anything. Do you get what I'm
all,
saying? It's more about
all
them
they
trying to
know.
get it to sell an experience,
Mhm.
like come experience poverty, but also get something to put on your resume because you did a little bit of. And you've already perfectly answered what my next question was going to be, which is basically, do American solutions work for African problems, or do we need African solutions for African problems? Um, yeah.
And I think the so and so called American solutions are purposeful. It's not a mistake. Like
Hmm.
it's not a mistake that they see like thousands, literally thousands of dollars that they use to take to for the travel expenses to look after the so-called volunteers to go and, for example, teach build schools in African or impoverished countries. It's not like they see all those zeros and they're like, we could actually it's not like they see the zeros and don't realize that we could do something better something more
No, they
enfranchising
see
with
it.
this
They
money.
just
They
don't want to.
know this. That's
Because
what I'm
so the
saying. I think
1% can't
it's
stay rich if other people, if that inequality gap closes. So they
fully,
need
and
to
they tell
create
her
this false philanthropy to make it seem like something's being done, but nothing's actually being done.
fully. And you, like you said, they
No,
sell the
100%.
experience. It's the
They saw an
experience.
experience.
The experience, and
Like,
then that
come
thing you can
crash
put
in
on
the
your
Bundus
CV.
for a minute. You know what I'm saying? So
And
it goes back to the idea that service is not trans and it's not a transaction, right? To make you
mm,
feel justified in living your first world life. Like come and
mm,
spend 3 weeks here and take a couple of bucket showers and now you're absolved of the very little charity work or
mm,
ignorance you feel towards poor people. Do you get what I'm
and
saying? So
fully.
I do think to an extent, in certain circumstances, or maybe I could be wrong, and this might sound a little bit inflammatory, but I do think it might be a little bit of a manifestation of white guilt. I really do,
A
especially
little,
because of what the media portrays,
a lot of
because
it.
it portrays people of color. Is it not?
Fully.
I think it is.
You did not lie. You did not miss. You did not miss.
No, I don't care. I
And then
don't care.
especially with the white guilt, it gives what it gives is it's that experience that, oh look, I did something, but also it's like, look how other people live. You should
Look how
appreciate your life.
precisely
You
you
should
should
appreciate
and it
what
always comes
you
with
have.
that I'm so grateful, narrative, which I think is also debatable. Truly,
So it's
truly,
like
truly debatable.
it's like it always gives me weird shivers down my spine when someone's talking or like giving a speech and they're like, yeah, I went there and I saw how they live and I helped them, but then I also realized how much I should be grateful for. This is not about
Oh, how
you.
boring.
What?
How boring.
I should be
Whatever
grateful for
major
my life,
loser.
seeing
Like,
how
how
they
boring.
live. It's just it's
It's such an
like what's
annoying
happening?
narrative.
What's
But you know what?
happening?
I feel bad a little bit that we're not necessarily, I don't feel bad. Let me not lie. I feel that we are not fully representing the demographic of people who engage in international volunteering. I don't think that all of their intentions are superficial and they're just there to take a couple of photos with some poor kids and make it seem like they care. I really don't think that that's the case all the time. I think sometimes their intentions are incredibly pure and they do think that there's actually some change, there is some form of development that they're going to help in by
Mm,
international volunteering. But we need to acknowledge that very often their
mm,
impact is so minimal that it literally negates their intentions almost because it does a lot more harm than it does good. So even if your intentions are good, if the impact that you are creating or you actually end up doing more harm than good, then your intention, do you know what I mean? Like your intention is
mm,
null and void now because you've actually gone there. You've done, for starters, a lot of the people that go, it's very short term, and as a result, there's no sustainable development. So, for example, when I was listening to Jing Ting Kang's TED talk, she was talking about how when she got to the orphanage in China, she started teaching the little kiddies the alphabet, right? And
mm,
she was like, "No, man, why are they picking up on this so quickly?" And she asked them why. They were just picking it up. A lot of the work she was teaching them so quickly. She was like, "You guys are so smart. What's going on?" Turns out she is part of the seventh group of volunteers to
mm,
teach them that exact thing, to teach them the alphabet.
mm,
Do you get what I'm saying? So these short-term little, let me go to China for 3 weeks and think I'm going to make a change or I'm going to teach these kids the alphabet. There's nothing that they're really learning because every volunteers has the same thing to offer because they're choosing the same demographic. I mean, there's only so much a groups of 19-year-olds can really teach me. Do you get what I'm saying?
mhm,
Untrained, you know, and like knowing of anything to do with the culture or anything really about like teaching or pedagogy. It's crazy. So you get like these short-term little visits. It just goes to show that even if your intentions are good, you get there, you might leave fulfilled, but you probably shouldn't be feeling fulfilled because you've actually done very little for kids. You've just created
mhm,
orphans who are also now going to there's even the psychological bit of just their abandonment issues. So you're just going to put it on your CV and leave. But now those kids are asking when you're going to come back, and you're
mhm,
not, because they constantly have
mhm,
people who are leaving them that are not really pouring much into them, but are constantly coming into their lives and then just leaving them.
mhm,
That has a toll on children, I'm sure. It has a toll on anybody, really. just constantly seeing new faces, but not seeing any change. That's crazy.
And I think it's exactly what you said about there are people with genuine intentions, genuine good intentions. And
Mm.
this is another flaw of the system that poverty porn provides with voluntourism, is that
Mm.
you have people with good intentions that think that they're going to make a change and therefore do these things and think that they have made the change and then go home. Whereas those people
And they
with good
move
intentions
on.
could have actually done and made better change because they do have good intentions, but they
Precise.
just get sucked into the cycle. And yeah.
They don't actually realize the extent of the harm that's actually being done. They think because their
Mhm,
intentions are good, that therefore their actions are producing good. And that's definitely not the case.
mhm.
Like, not even a little bit. So, yeah, no, that's actually, no, that's really crazy. But now I ask you, do you think voluntourism is like the problem with it? Who is really to blame? Is it the organizations or is the onus on the actual individual, the individual volunteers?
I think both. I think both
Fair,
can be
fair,
blamed. Both can be
fair.
blamed. So like a lot of the volunteers, right, are like in high school, like grade 10, grade 11, grade 12. And so in that time you can be vulnerable um to I wouldn't
Believing
say
that you're going to make a
exploitation
difference.
because it's not. Yeah, just being naive into believing that yeah, this organization is going to do good. Because I mean, their
Fair.
campaigns are extremely the rhetoric used is extremely convincing.
Mm.
Um, so so I think that there's a I think the organizations are more to blame, way more to blame, because you've been doing this. If you are breaking down schools to rebuild them, there's no way
You're
that
the
you cannot
problem.
receive
You're
help.
definitely the problem.
That you're definitely the issue. But I think
Yeah.
there is a responsibility also on the people going. So maybe the grade 10s can be forgiven and be like, yeah, you just got finessed, sure. But
Yeah.
if you're like 30, 20, 25 to 30, going to these things, believing that like, then surely you're part of the issue.
You're also part of the problem. Okay, no, definitely. No, definitely.
That's,
Like people who also continuously engage in like volunteer, like international volunteering, even after they can see that, no, man, there's something not right here. This actually isn't
mm.
benefiting anybody. Do you get what I'm saying?
but
But you
then, but
continuously
then,
do it because a lot of it is just about getting a free trip, but making it seem like you're some good, humanitarian, like good
mm,
Samaritan.
precisely. But I think then the question can be asked: then what do those people that have good intentions do then if they're not going to go to the uh, if we don't have these organizations doing voluntourism, what do they do if they still
Instead.
see these issues? Sorry?
Well, I mean, as in, what do they do instead? If
Yeah.
they genuinely do want to make change, I think there's so
Yeah.
many other ways to make like tangible change. And you know what? I think when it comes to saving the world, it really just starts with one person. You don't even have
Mm,
to do a lot. You really don't like. And this sounds so optimistic and airy fairy, but if you, Yangs, are a grade 12 student, you know that you went to a very, very good school, high school. You are
mm,
very well versed in your subjects. You are very good, like academically. You sit like you're in a good place.
mm,
All it takes for you to actively help or change the world is to connect with a student from a less privileged school, give them some of your learning material where you can. That one student, you've probably made a lot more impact on that one student within your community than you going to Ghana for 3 weeks and building a school that's going to be broken down has actually
mm,
resulted in. So people with genuine intentions can find small ways, because if everybody helped one person, where like how much good could we really impact on the world? Do you get what I'm saying?
mm,
We could do so much if everybody just tried to help one person in the ways that they can. And not everyone can teach. Not everyone can maybe tutor or give over their notes. Some people just have money and they just want to use their money. So then what you'll do is that you'll find genuine, and I don't want to think that all charity organizations are bad organizations. There are charity organizations, and you can just use those. Yes, it goes back to the naivety of not really understanding an organization's motives, like are purely driven by profit and thinking that they're actually going to make change. Meanwhile, they're not. But actually finding organizations actually fulfill the mandate that they set out to fulfill. Do you get what I'm saying? So there's so many ways that people can actually still make like changes, and that's such a good question that you asked, because I was just about to like a final most perfect question to sum up everything discussed is how can we alleviate the effects of poverty / raise awareness about volunteerism. Do you think people know about it? Do you think people care? Have people become desensitized or nonchalant when it comes to actively aiding people who are less fortunate?
I think, yeah, in terms of awareness, I would like to think the people I've engaged with in my spaces and I've spoken to, um, a lot of them are aware of the dangers of voluntourism and of poverty porn. But I'm not sure if that's a widespread thing.
Yeah,
And I think obviously with me and such like of this podcast,
yeah,
breaking things down in your institutions respectively, um, that's how it begins to become more. People begin to become
widespread.
more aware of this. I d- and I think it's especially an issue within privileged spaces. Mm. So I think
Yeah,
with breaking it down, especially for me, my job as a med student. Side note, actually, I saw a tweet by another med student, and one of these things that happens in third year and fourth year, once you've learned how to do the basics like taking blood pressure. What you
yeah,
do is they have like free clinics that they send universities normally send students into like free clinics that will be closer or sometimes within townships, and the, so people can get access to um, health,
healthcare.
healthcare in those spaces. So in that regard, it can be a good thing. But also, a tweet said by this another med student, which I really understood. Let me read the tweet out to you because it's very important. It said.
Mm.
Hold on, I'm pulling it up right now. Unpopular opinion. Forcing poor patients to go to your med student run free clinics to be treated is not high quality healthcare. It's segregated healthcare. So I think
Yes,
so I
definitely.
think what's important is it's realizing that within your own spaces there are forms of poverty porn, there are forms of
That is exactly it.
voluntourism, and not look, there are people that have been helped. I have friends who are med students who have found someone with high blood pressure and they got medical care. I can't
Mm.
negate that. That's a fact that happened to someone's life. I can't
Yeah,
negate that. But what I can say is that within these systems that allow people to receive high quality healthcare, because like the best doctors in the country are extremely expensive, and then the rest have to get like go to public healthcare, or some even
yeah.
have to, like I said, have to get healthcare from students. Is that fair in itself? No, it's not fair.
No,
It's not fair. And so
no,
it's being
definitely.
aware of
I
that
don't
within
think
your own
that poor
spaces.
people should have to be guinea pigs for like, or test subjects for aspiring doctors. They should be able to have access to even the best doctors. And that was what goes exactly back to voluntourism, is that it should be the best of the best who are continuously making sure that they're doing like charity work, or that they're doing like their form of community service. It should be the best lawyers that are taking on pro bono cases. It should, like that should constantly be the thing in our head, that they shouldn't be like, when these organizations are recruiting people, they shouldn't want to be recruiting people that just want a free ride, or just
Mm,
wanting to make their little bit of change. It should be people who are going to make active changes.
So here's my thing. Here's my thing. If there's a company that wants to do positive volunteerism, here's my example. There's no
Mm,
positive volunteerism, but wants to put that money into the right place.
yeah.
Get professionals who are really qualified and
Yes.
pay them well to go into communities and, for example, in the healthcare system, provide proper healthcare.
Yeah.
That's how
It's that
that's how
simple.
that should be done, in my opinion. But
It's that
hey,
simple.
it's just
No, it's
just my
definitely that
opinion.
simple. No, it's definitely that simple. I think that's like, oh, that's actually so important. I'm so glad that you brought up that tweet. when it comes to what you had said earlier about how like raising awareness that it people who are more likely to engage in volunteering, people who live in privileged spaces, and that's where we need to make sure that we're directing or awareness about it. I think it does go back to the naivety of people not knowing the impacts of it, and if we could improve in making it known that this actually doesn't do a lot of good for the people that you think you're helping, I think that that would be able to then not only, and also just to remind people that charities that would help us be able to, in whatever way we can, be able to eliminate the effects or alleviate the effects rather of volunteerism, and then hopefully potentially maybe making sure that we don't perpetuate it, because I know we've been speaking about how the West goes to the South so much now, but I'm thinking of even people that I know on Africa Day, they'll post their photos with young black children who are starving. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So we also have an issue of replicating what we see and what is created in the West. And I think that we should stop that, especially considering our close proximity to poverty, right? Also, why are you sure? Like, I understand, I think like very often it's not a matter of wanting to incentivize other people or to motivate other people to do charity work. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't think when they post those photos, that is their intention. They're just showing off their good deed because it makes them feel good. Yangeni, if I'm trying to doing charity work for you, I'm gonna say, Yangeni, we have a soup kitchen tomorrow. You're coming with. Let's go. Instead of going to the movies, let's go do that. Do you get what I'm saying? I don't think when I post a photo and say, oh look, I'm holding this hungry orphaned baby, and I send it to you, that I'm now incentivizing actually. So I think even just the use of media in charity is a very tricky subject. But to talk about that and open that can of worms, we'd be here all day.
We would. Could
Yeah,
happen.
I know
This
that
discussion
for
could go on.
a fact. For a fact. So yeah, do you think that even if people were made aware about voluntourism and the effect, they would care? Final question: do you think that they would care?
Ooh, care is such an
Because do they really care
it's
about the people they're helping if they know that they're not qualified to help them? Or is it just about a free trip and some fun and a chance to go to Kenya for free? Do you think they would really care?
I think something like care, which is few and far between in this society today, is something hard to quantify.
Mm.
Because, like you said, there are people with genuine intentions,
Intentions.
and I think they would care. Do I think that it would be as much of a hype, a trend that it was a couple years? No.
Mm. Okay. No, I'm just interested
Yeah.
because when I was listening to one of the TED Talks that I was listening to, the one by Madara Gute, she was saying at the end of it, she was asked a couple of questions by the audience. And one of the questions was, would you volunteer internationally again? And she said, maybe, I don't know. After giving a TED Talk talking about the dangers of volunteerism, this girl said maybe that she doesn't know, which means possibly. When you don't say no, then that means possibly. So
Yeah.
that's why I asked, do people really care? Because she's aware, she gave a whole TED Talk about it, and that she would still contemplate doing it again.
Mm.
She said,
Because I think
she doesn't know.
I think she sees that like she wants to help, but she doesn't know how. You know.
And maybe if she found an organization that would actually do what it's supposed to, she'd be able to, hop on the
Mm,
train.
mm, mm.
No, that's crazy. No, that's definitely crazy. Oh
And
my
like
gosh.
I think one of them. I'm not sure about the deep dynamics. And I know, for example, Doctors Without Borders has many flaws. Um, but for the most part, those are qualified doctors going into places where that need the help, for example. So I think if it's about genuine care and if you can make genuine change, you've got to use your area of expertise to make
Do
that
so.
change. You, you,
Yeah, definitely.
if you're not an expert in something, become an expert in something and then make the change. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like, don't go
I
and do
hear
some
you
half-assed shit.
100%.
Don't go and do
Okay,
some half-assed shit. Yeah.
okay, no. I'm going to hold you to that, because maybe in a couple of years when you're qualified and you finish your degree, and I will replay this podcast for you and I'll be like, you said
Yeah,
become qualified in something and go help people. So if you don't,
yeah.
I'm going to kick you. That's the only
No, no.
option.
You know what? No, no, no. You know, you're talking to the future Minister of Health. You understand?
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
No, close it up, Cyril. Close it up. Just put it on lockdown level 5. Shut it down for my sake.
So, so I'm telling you now that this podcast free for now. Actually, even in the future, we'll do. It'll be free, but I'm gonna have a price for that.
You're gonna have a price. You're gonna have an hourly rate. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Yangs, this has been
Yeah,
such
thank
a
you.
wonderful discussion. I've loved it so much. It's been awesome to catch up, but also just to pick apart your brain and discuss something that I think is important and that just honestly isn't discussed enough. Um, and even just in considering the climate now with COVID-19 and, travel, all that stuff, maybe that might have an effect on voluntourism. We don't
Mm,
really know, but maybe when things start opening up again, people might want to get back into it. So I think this is something that's very important for us to have discussed. And I'm just so grateful that you joined the podcast. Thank you so much again. It's been a pleasure having
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. I really
you.
appreciate it. It was lovely to speak with you and really discuss things in depth. Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I know. Oh, that's so wonderful. Thanks, Yang, so much. To anybody who actually to the end and listened to this podcast and enjoyed it, thank you so much for listening. I hope your brain has been expanded in some form or another, that you know something that maybe you didn't know before, that you thought of something that this is potentially share with friends who might consider doing like international volunteering, or who just weren't really sure of the media that they're actually consuming, because sometimes we just consume things, we don't really understand how it's actually rewiring our brain to interpret certain ways or to formulate certain ideas. So if you made it all the way to the end here, thank you so much for joining. Please don't forget to like this video, share it so people know about it, so that we can alleviate the effects of volunteerism by sharing this and making sure more people know about the harms thereof. And don't forget to follow our Instagram at postanthromovement_. Subscribe, like, comment, share, all of the above. Thank you so much for listening.